Before we begin, we'd like to ask you to tell us your name and the city you're watching from. We love getting to know our audience. Also, please don't forget to give this video a like, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel. That way we can keep bringing you more stories like this one. The Caribbean sun bled crimson across the horizon as the Serpent's Mercy cut through the jade waters off the coast of what would one day be called Florida. It was 1718, and the world still belonged to those brave, or foolish enough to claim it with powder and steel. Captain Reese Blackwell stood at the helm, his dark coat billowing in the salt-thick wind. His face was weathered bronze, carved by years of sun and survival, and his eyes held the gray of distant storms. Men whispered that he could navigate by starlight alone, that he'd bargained with sea devils for his uncanny luck. Women whispered other things, that his heart was locked tighter than any treasure chest, that he'd loved once and sworn never again. Below deck, in the cramped quarters that smelled of gunpowder and rum, two sisters prepared for the evening watch. Eleanor Thorne braided her copper hair with practiced fingers, each movement efficient and sure. At 24, she was the elder by 3 years, and she wore that responsibility like armor. Her sister Cassandra sat cross-legged on her hammock, cleaning her pistol with almost reverent care. Where Eleanor was fire-contained, Cassandra was wildfire unchained, dark curls escaping their tie, eyes bright with perpetual mischief. They'd been aboard the Serpent's Mercy for 6 months, having earned their place through skill rather than sentiment. Their father, the infamous Morgan Thorne, had raised them on the deck of his own ship until a Spanish galleon sent him to the depths 3 years past. The sisters had scattered after that, taking what crew would have them, learning that the sea had no mercy for orphans, even pirate ones. "You're staring at nothing again," Cassandra observed, not looking up from her work. Eleanor blinked, realizing she'd been gazing at the wooden planks above. Just thinking. About him. It wasn't a question. Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks, hating how transparent she'd become. "Don't be absurd." Cassandra finally met her eyes, and something flickered there. Something Eleanor couldn't quite name. "We both know what we're doing here, Ellie. We can pretend it's about the shares, about the freedom of the sea, about carrying on Father's legacy. But we're lying to ourselves." The truth sat between them like a loaded pistol. 6 months of watching Reese Blackwell command his ship with quiet authority. 6 months of brief conversations that felt like promises. 6 months of wondering if a man who'd sworn off love could ever be convinced otherwise. "He doesn't even see us as women," Eleanor said quietly. "To him, we're just good crew." Cassandra smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Then we'll have to make him see differently." The bell rang for evening watch, cutting short whatever Eleanor might have said. They climbed to the deck together, emerging into the cooling air. The crew moved with synchronized efficiency. 40 souls who'd chosen this life over the alternatives the world offered. Honest work for dishonest wages, they said. Starvation with dignity, or plenty with risk. Reese stood at the quarterdeck conferring with his quartermaster, a grizzled Scotsman named Macready. When Eleanor and Cassandra took their positions at the rigging, his gaze swept across them with the same detached assessment he gave everything aboard his ship. No warmth, no recognition of the tension that had been building like a storm cloud. "Steady as she goes," Reese called out, his voice carrying across the deck without strain. "We'll make port at Nassau by week's end if the wind holds." Nassau, the pirate republic, where governors looked the other way for the right price, where every tavern held 100 stories of glory and ruin. Eleanor felt her pulse quicken. Nassau meant opportunity, and danger in equal measure. As night descended and the stars emerged like scattered diamonds, Eleanor took her turn at watch. The sea stretched endlessly in every direction, black and unknowable. She'd been born on water, raised to read its moods like others read books, and tonight it felt restless, waiting. Footsteps on the deck made her turn. Reese approached, 2 tin cups in his hands. He offered her one without preamble. "Rum," he said simply. "You look like you could use it." Eleanor accepted, their fingers brushing briefly. Even that small contact sent electricity through her. "Thank you, Captain." He leaned against the rail beside her, staring out at the darkness. For several minutes neither spoke. The ship creaked and swayed, a living thing beneath them. "Your father was a good man," Reese said finally. "Taught me half of what I know about reading the currents near the Carolinas. I didn't know you'd sailed together. Years back, before I had my own command." He took a long drink. "He talked about you girls. Said you'd be the fiercest pirates the Caribbean ever saw if you chose that path. And here we are. Here you are. Something in his tone made her look at him. In the moonlight, his profile was all sharp angles and shadows. Do you ever regret it? This life? Eleanor considered the question honestly. Every life has regrets, Captain. At least this one is ours to choose. He turned to face her fully, and for a moment, she saw past the legendary captain to the man beneath, lonely, guarded, carrying weights she could only imagine. You remind me of someone, he said softly. She had your courage, your certainty. What happened to her? She died. The words were flat, final. Yellow fever, in Port Royal. I was away on a raid, chasing Spanish gold while she burned up in a rented room calling for me. He drained his cup. After that, I decided some men aren't meant for anything beyond the ship. Eleanor's heart ached for him, but she kept her voice steady. My father used to say that the sea doesn't care about our plans. It takes what it wants, gives what it will. The only thing we control is whether we keep sailing. Rhys studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then Cassandra's voice rang out from across the deck. Captain, movement off the starboard bow. The spell broke instantly. Rhys was already moving, his captain's instinct overriding everything else. Eleanor followed, her hand automatically checking her pistol. Through the darkness illuminated by the ship's lanterns, another vessel emerged. Not a merchant ship. The lines were too aggressive, the approach too deliberate. A pirate hunter or another predator looking for prey. All hands, Rhys bellowed. Battle stations. The deck erupted into controlled chaos. Cannons were loaded, weapons distributed, positions taken. Eleanor found herself beside Cassandra at the port guns, both of them moving with the precision their father had drilled into them since childhood. Identify yourself, Rhys called across the water. The answer came in the form of cannon fire, a warning shot that splashed 20 yards off their bow. The message was clear: surrender or fight. Rhys's laugh carried across the deck, wild and dangerous. This was the man the legends spoke of, the one who'd never backed down from a challenge. Macready, hard to port. Let's show these bastards why they should have sailed the other direction. What followed was a brutal dance of wood and iron, fire and fury. The Serpent's Mercy twisted through the waves like its namesake, bringing its guns to bear. Eleanor's world narrowed to the rhythm of loading, firing, loading again. Beside her, Cassandra worked with fierce concentration, her earlier playfulness replaced by deadly focus. A cannonball crashed through the rail 10 feet away, showering them with splinters. Eleanor's ears rang, but her hands kept moving. This was survival, pure and primal. Through the smoke and chaos, she caught glimpses of Rhys at the wheel, steering them through impossibly tight maneuvers. He was magnificent in battle, alive in a way she'd never seen him during peaceful sailing. The enemy ship tried to close for boarding, but Rhys anticipated the move, swinging the Serpent's Mercy around to rake their stern with a devastating broadside. The other vessel's mainmast cracked, tilting dangerously. Reload, Eleanor shouted, though her voice was lost in the thunder. But the enemy had had enough. They limped away into the darkness, leaving the Serpent's Mercy victorious but battered. As the adrenaline faded, Eleanor became aware of the cost. 3 men wounded, the deck scarred with shot, rigging that would need hours of repair. Rhys appeared through the clearing smoke, checking on his crew with quick efficiency. When he reached the sisters, his eyes swept over them, assessing for injury. You fought well, he said, and something in his gaze lingered on Eleanor a moment longer than necessary. Both of you. Then he was moving on, the captain once more, and Eleanor was left with her pounding heart and the certainty that everything had changed. In the crucible of battle, walls had cracked. The question was whether Rhys Blackwell would let them crumble completely, or build them higher than ever before. As dawn painted the sky in shades of pearl and gold, Eleanor finally allowed herself to admit the truth she'd been avoiding. She was falling in love with a man who'd sworn never to love again. And beside her, she suspected, Cassandra was doing the same. The storm ahead wouldn't come from the sea. It would come from the human heart, always more treacherous, always more deadly than any cannon fire. Nassau emerged from the morning mist like a fever dream, a ramshackle paradise of vice and violence where civilization's rules dissolved into rum and gold. The harbor bristled with masts, dozens of ships flying flags of convenience or no flags at all. This was the Republic of Pirates where Edward Teach once walked and where fortunes changed hands faster than the tide. Eleanor stood at the rail as the Serpent's Mercy glided into port, her eyes tracing the chaos of the waterfront. Taverns spilled drunken laughter into the streets. Merchants haggled over stolen goods, and somewhere in the distance, a fiddle played a mournful tune. The air smelled of salt, sweat, and opportunity. First time in Nassau? Rhys materialized beside her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Father brought us once, years ago. I remember thinking it was the freest place on earth. Free and dangerous are often the same thing. He gazed at the town with the wariness of a man who'd survived it before. Stay close when we go ashore. This place has a way of swallowing people whole. The concern in his voice made Eleanor's chest tighten. Since the battle 3 nights ago, something had shifted between them. Small moments of contact, conversations that lasted longer than necessary, glances that carried unspoken questions. She wasn't imagining it. Neither was Cassandra, who'd grown quieter, more watchful. They anchored mid-harbor and Rhys gathered the crew on deck. 3 days shore leave. Spend your shares wisely. Keep your weapons close. And if you're not back when we sail, we're not waiting. His eyes swept across them. Macready stays with the ship. The rest of you, try not to start any wars. The crew dispersed with eager anticipation, but Rhys caught Eleanor's arm as she moved to follow. You and Cassandra. With me tonight. There's someone I need to meet, and I want people I trust at my back. Trust. The word hung between them, precious as any treasure. By nightfall, they were walking through Nassau's twisted streets, the 3 of them moving like shadows. Cassandra flanked Rhys's left, Eleanor his right, both sisters armed and alert. The taverns they passed pulsed with life. Pirates celebrating recent prizes, prostitutes negotiating prices, gamblers risking everything on the turn of a card. Rhys led them to a building that looked slightly less decrepit than its neighbors, a 2-story structure with guards at the door who nodded them through without question. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and whispered deals. A woman waited at a corner table, her face half hidden by the low light. She was perhaps 40, beautiful in a dangerous way, dressed in clothes too fine for Nassau's usual clientele. When she saw Rhys, she smiled. Blackwell, I wondered if you'd come. Isabella. Rhys took the offered seat, gesturing for the sisters to flank him. These are the Thorne sisters. They sail with me now. Isabella's dark eyes assessed them with predatory intelligence. Morgan's daughters. I heard he'd passed. My condolences. He was a rare man who kept his word. What do you want, Isabella? Rhys's tone was careful, controlled. Straight to business. I always admired that about you. She poured rum from a crystal decanter that seemed absurdly elegant in this setting. There's a Spanish treasure fleet departing Havana in 2 weeks. 3 galleons carrying silver from the Potosi mines. Enough to make every man on your ship wealthy beyond dreams. Eleanor felt her pulse quicken. A prize like that could change everything. And you're telling me this out of generosity? Rhys asked, skepticism clear. Out of necessity. The fleet has protection. 2 warships, both well-armed. I need someone skilled enough to take them, someone crazy enough to try. Isabella's smile sharpened. You've never backed down from impossible odds, Rhys. That's why you're still alive when so many others are feeding the fish. Cassandra leaned forward, unable to contain herself. What's your share? 40%, you take all the risk, I take a finder's fee. 30, Rhys countered immediately. 35, and I provide maps of their route, timing, and the warship's capabilities. Rhys studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. Done. They spent the next hour reviewing details. Charts spread across the table, Isabella's intelligence painting a picture of danger and reward in equal measure. Eleanor found herself admiring the woman's thoroughness, even as she wondered what motivated someone to broker death and fortune with such calm efficiency. When they finally emerged back into Nassau's streets, the night had deepened. Rhys seemed lost in thought, calculating odds and strategies. Captain, Eleanor ventured, can we trust her? Isabella doesn't betray partners. Bad for business. But she doesn't care if we survive either, as long as she gets paid. He glanced between them. This raid will be the most dangerous thing I've ever attempted. If either of you wants to sit it out, I'll arrange passage to... No. Both sisters spoke simultaneously, then looked at each other. Rhys's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Your father would be proud. You're both exactly what he said you'd become. They walked in silence until Cassandra suddenly stopped outside a tavern where music spilled into the street. "I'm going in for a drink. You two go ahead." Eleanor started to protest, but Cassandra was already disappearing through the door. She found herself alone with Rhys in the lamp-lit street, acutely aware of his proximity. "She knows," Rhys said quietly. "Knows what?" He turned to face her fully, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "What's happening between us? What I've been trying to ignore for months now." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "And what is happening between us, Captain? Something I swore I'd never allow again." His hand rose, hovering near her face but not quite touching. "Something that terrifies me more than any Spanish warship." The street around them seemed to fade. The noise, the chaos, everything except the man standing before her, finally letting his walls crack open. "I'm not her," Eleanor whispered. "The woman you lost. I'm not fragile. I'm not waiting in some room for you to return. I'm here on the deck, choosing this life with full knowledge of its cost." "I know." His voice was rough with emotion. "That's what makes it worse. Because I can feel myself falling, Eleanor, and I don't know how to stop it." She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "Then don't stop. Fall with me." For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, wanted it with an intensity that shocked her. But then footsteps approached, drunken sailors stumbling past, and the spell broke. Rhys stepped back, his captain's mask sliding back into place. "We should return to the ship," he said, but his eyes betrayed him, still burning with everything left unsaid. They walked back in charged silence, and Eleanor knew that everything was about to change. The Spanish treasure fleet was just a prize, just gold and silver. The real treasure was the man beside her, and the war that was coming wouldn't be fought with cannons, but with the human heart's impossible choices. Somewhere behind them in Nassau's labyrinth, Cassandra sat alone in a tavern, her own heart breaking with the same realization. The storm had arrived. The Serpent's Mercy cut through Caribbean waters with deadly purpose. Every sail stretched taut, every man aboard sharp with anticipation. 2 weeks had passed since Nassau, 2 weeks of preparation and gathering intelligence, 2 weeks of tension so thick it could be cut with a cutlass. Eleanor stood at the bow, watching the horizon where their fate waited. The Spanish treasure fleet would pass through the channel between Cuba and the Florida coast at dawn. Isabella's intelligence had been precise. 3 galleons heavy with silver, 2 warships bristling with guns. Suicide odds for most captains. For Rhys Blackwell, it was Tuesday. Behind her, she heard Cassandra's voice raised in laughter with some of the crew. Her sister had grown distant since Nassau, throwing herself into ship duties with manic energy, avoiding private conversations. The unspoken truth sat between them like a loaded cannon, both loving the same man, both knowing only one could have him, if any could have him at all. "Penny for your thoughts." Rhys appeared beside her, as he so often did these days, drawn by invisible threads neither could name. "Wondering if we'll survive tomorrow?" "We will." His certainty was absolute, the confidence of a man who'd cheated death so many times it had become routine. "I've been thinking about after." "After?" He was quiet for a moment, choosing words carefully. "A captain needs a first mate he can trust absolutely, someone who thinks like he does, who can command when he can't." His gray eyes found hers. "I want you in that position, Eleanor. Officially." Her breath caught. First mate meant respect, authority, a place at his side that no one could question. It also meant something else, a declaration that she was different from the rest of the crew. "What about Macready?" "Macready's ready to retire, take his shares and buy a tavern somewhere civilized. He's earned it." Rhys's hand found hers on the rail, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "I need you, Eleanor. Not just for this raid. For everything that comes after." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Before she could respond, a voice shattered the moment. "Captain." Cassandra stood 20 feet away, her face pale in the moonlight. She'd seen them, the held hands, the intimacy. Her expression was a mask, but Eleanor knew her sister well enough to see the fracture underneath. Rhys pulled his hand away, professional distance reasserting itself. "What is it?" "Macready needs you below. Question about the gun placements for tomorrow." Cassandra's voice was steady, betraying nothing. He nodded and departed, leaving the sisters alone on the deck. The silence stretched like a wound opening. "Cass," Eleanor began. "Don't." Cassandra's voice was sharp as broken glass. Don't apologize, don't explain. I'm not blind, Ellie. I've seen how he looks at you, how you orbit each other like twin stars. You feel it too. It wasn't a question. Cassandra laughed bitterly. Of course I do. How could I not? He's everything father wanted to be. Brilliant, fearless, incorruptible in his own twisted way. She turned to face Eleanor fully. But he's chosen you. I can see it, even if he hasn't said the words yet. Eleanor felt tears sting her eyes. I never meant. I know you didn't. That's what makes it worse. Cassandra's own eyes were wet. We've survived everything together, Ellie. Our father's death, the seas that tried to swallow us, men who thought we were weak because we're women. But this? I don't know if we survive this. You're my sister. Nothing changes that. Everything changes it. Cassandra's voice cracked. Because I love him too, and I can't just turn that off because you saw him first because he chose you. And tomorrow we might all die anyway, so what does any of it matter? She walked away before Eleanor could respond, disappearing below deck. Eleanor stood alone, salt spray mixing with tears, her heart torn between love and loyalty. The night crept toward dawn with agonizing slowness. Eleanor tried to sleep but couldn't, her mind churning with strategy for the coming battle and the impossible situation with Cassandra. Finally, she gave up and returned to the deck. Rhys was there, as she somehow knew he would be, studying the stars with a sextant. He looked up as she approached, and something in his expression told her he'd been waiting. Can't sleep either? He asked. Too much weighing on tomorrow. He set down the sextant and faced her fully. The ship creaked around them, the crew mostly below, giving them a privacy that felt both precious and dangerous. Eleanor, I need to tell you something before the battle, in case... He stopped, jaw working. In case I don't get another chance. Her heart hammered. Rhys, when my wife died, I locked something away inside myself. Told myself it was safer that way, cleaner. No attachments, no vulnerabilities. His voice was raw with emotion. But you broke through anyway. You and your damned courage. Your refusal to be anything less than exactly who you are. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the silver threading his dark hair, the scars that mapped his face like roots on a chart. I'm falling in love with you, Eleanor Thorne. Maybe I already have. And it terrifies me more than any Spanish guns ever could. The words she'd been longing to hear. Finally spoken. Eleanor reached up, cupping his weathered face in her hands. Then be terrified with me, she whispered. Because I'm in love with you too, you impossible, stubborn man. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like she'd imagined. It was better, desperate and tender, tasting of salt and rum and promises neither could guarantee. His arms wrapped around her like she was the only solid thing in a world of shifting tides. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. After tomorrow, if we survive, I want you by my side, not just as first mate. His eyes searched hers. As my wife, as my partner in everything. Eleanor's breath caught. Marriage aboard a pirate ship wasn't legal by any traditional measure, but it was binding in the only way that mattered. By choice, by oath, by the recognition of the crew. Yes, she breathed. Yes, Rhys. 1,000 times yes. They held each other as the sky began to lighten, painting the world in shades of amber and rose. Somewhere below, Eleanor knew Cassandra was awake too, feeling her own heart break as the universe realigned around choices none of them could take back. The dawn came swift and merciless. The Spanish fleet appeared on the horizon exactly where Isabella had promised, 3 fat galleons riding low in the water, flanked by 2 warships whose guns gleamed in the early light. All hands! Rhys's voice carried across the deck, transformed into the captain of legend. Battle stations. This is what we came for, lads. Today we take what Spain thinks belongs to them. The crew erupted in fierce cheers, weapons raised, years of resentment against empire and oppression channeling into pure aggression. Eleanor took her position as acting first mate, Cassandra at the guns. Both sisters professional despite the personal wreckage between them. The Serpent's Mercy surged forward like its namesake, swift and deadly. Rhys had planned the approach with typical brilliance, using the morning sun to blind the warship's gunners, coming in at an angle that minimized their exposure. The first broadside was theirs, cannons roaring in synchronized fury. One of the warships took the full force, its side exploding in splinters and screaming men. But the Spanish weren't helpless. Return fire came fast and brutal, cannonballs shrieking through the rigging. Eleanor moved through the chaos like she'd been born for it, directing crews, reinforcing weak points, her father's training, and her own instinct merging into deadly efficiency. Across the deck, she caught glimpses of Cassandra, equally magnificent in battle, fear transformed into pure concentration. Rhys steered them through impossible maneuvers, dancing between the warships while his gunners pounded the treasure galleons. It was working. Against all odds, it was actually working. Then everything went wrong. A lucky shot from the second warship caught their mainmast, and the world exploded in falling timber and canvas. Eleanor felt herself thrown backward, pain lancing through her shoulder as she hit the deck. Through ringing ears, she heard Rhys shouting orders, the battle continuing its brutal rhythm. She struggled to her feet, vision swimming, and saw Cassandra racing toward the damaged mast where men were trapped beneath the fallen rigging. Without hesitation, her sister dove into the tangle of rope and wood, cutting men free with desperate speed. And then Eleanor saw it, the second warship, turning to bring its full broadside to bear, aimed directly at where Cassandra worked. The angle was perfect for them, deadly for the Serpent's mercy. "Cass!" Eleanor's scream was lost in the thunder of guns. She ran, ignoring the pain in her shoulder, knowing she wouldn't reach her sister in time, knowing what was about to happen and powerless to stop it. The cannonball screamed through the air, time stretching like heated glass. Eleanor ran, her legs burning, arm outstretched toward her sister who looked up too late, eyes widening in recognition of death's arrival. Then Rhys was there, impossibly fast, impossibly brave, crashing into Cassandra and sending them both tumbling across the deck as the shot obliterated the spot where she'd been standing. Splinters erupted like deadly rain, the mast groaning as it shifted further. Eleanor reached them as they struggled to their feet, Rhys bleeding from a gash across his temple, Cassandra white-faced but alive. Their eyes met, and in that instant everything unspoken passed between the three of them. Love and sacrifice, jealousy and gratitude, the terrible beauty of moments that change everything. "Back to your stations," Rhys roared, captain once more. "We're not done yet." The battle raged for another brutal hour. The Serpent's mercy was battered but unbowed, and Rhys's strategy finally paid off. One warship limping away disabled, the other forced to retreat to protect the treasure galleons. But two of the fat merchant ships were theirs for the taking, their holds bursting with Spanish silver. When the guns finally fell silent, the crew erupted in exhausted celebration. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, they'd won. Eleanor found Cassandra at the starboard rail, staring at the captured galleons. Her sister's hands trembled slightly, the only sign of how close death had come. "He saved my life," Cassandra said quietly. He didn't hesitate. "Even knowing—" She stopped, jaw tight. "Even knowing you love him too," Eleanor finished. Cassandra turned to face her, and Eleanor saw tears tracking through the powder stained on her sister's face. "He chose you, Ellie. Not just now, but from the beginning. I was just too stubborn to accept it. Cass, let me finish." Cassandra's voice was fierce. "I'm angry. I'm heartbroken. Part of me wants to hate you both. But you're my sister, and I saw how he looked at you when he thought you'd been hurt. That's real, Ellie. That's the kind of love Father told us about, the kind worth dying for." She took a shaking breath. "So I'm letting him go. Not because I want to, but because holding on will destroy us all." Eleanor pulled her sister into a tight embrace, both of them crying now, mourning what could never be while honoring what remained. Blood, history, survival. "I need to leave the ship," Cassandra whispered against her shoulder. "Not because I don't love you, but because I do. I can't watch you two together and not feel this poison growing inside me." "Where will you go?" "Isabella offered me a place in Nassau. Running intelligence, coordinating raids, it's good work and I'll have my own command eventually." Cassandra pulled back, wiping her eyes. "We'll see each other again, Ellie. Just not yet. Not until this wound has time to scar over." The sisters stood together as the sun climbed higher, two women forged by the same fires now walking different paths. That night, as the crew divided the treasure and sang songs of victory, Rhys found Eleanor in his cabin. The captured silver sat in chests along the walls. Enough wealth to retire, to buy land, to live like royalty. "Your sister spoke to me," he said quietly. "She's taking a boat to Nassau at dawn." Eleanor nodded, throat tight. "I know. I'm sorry. If there was any way, there isn't. She met his eyes. Some choices have no good answers. We can only try to make them with honor. Rhys drew her close, and she melted into his embrace, drawing strength from his solid presence. I meant what I said before the battle. I want you as my wife, Eleanor. If you'll still have me. Yes. The word came without hesitation. Yes. I'll marry you. They were wed the next evening, under a Caribbean sunset that painted the sky in impossible colors. MacReady performed the ceremony with gruff dignity, the crew bearing witness. Cassandra stood at Eleanor's side as honor witness, her face composed but eyes revealing the cost of her grace. When Rhys kissed his bride, the crew erupted in cheers. But Eleanor's eyes found her sister's, and they shared a look that held everything: love and loss, sacrifice and survival, the knowledge that some storms leave scars that never fully fade. At dawn, Eleanor stood at the rail watching a small boat row toward Nassau, Cassandra's figure growing smaller with distance. Rhys's arms circled her waist, solid and warm. She'll find her own happiness, he said softly. She's too strong not to. I know. Eleanor leaned into him. But it doesn't make it hurt less. They stood together as the sun rose. Captain and first mate, husband and wife. Two souls who'd found each other in a world of chaos and claimed their love despite the cost. The Serpent's Mercy caught the wind and turned north, carrying them toward new adventures. In her cabin, Eleanor kept a letter Cassandra had left. Words of forgiveness and fury, grief and grudging blessing. She read it often, especially on nights when guilt gnawed at her happiness. The Caribbean held many treasures: gold and silver, spices and jewels. But the rarest treasure of all was love freely given, and Eleanor had claimed hers with full knowledge of its price. She would cherish it, honor it, and never forget that it came at the cost of her sister's broken heart. 3 years later, word reached them that Cassandra had her own ship, the Siren's Daughter, and a fearsome reputation to match. She'd never married, though men tried. She'd built an empire of intelligence and strategic raids, becoming a legend in her own right. And on a warm evening in Port Royal, the two sisters finally met again in a tavern, older and scarred, but still bound by blood. They embraced carefully, wounds healed to acceptance, if not peace. You look happy, Cassandra said, studying Eleanor's face. I am. Are you? Cassandra smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. I'm free. That's close enough. They drank together late into the night, sharing stories and laughter, proving that love could survive even the cruelest choices. The sea had taught them that: how to weather storms, how to navigate by stars, how to keep sailing even when the winds tried to break them. When they parted at dawn, Rhys waiting at one dock and Cassandra's crew at another, the sisters held each other close. Thank you, Eleanor whispered, for letting me have this. Thank you, Cassandra answered, for reminding me I was strong enough to survive losing it. The Serpent's Mercy and the Siren's Daughter sailed from port in opposite directions, carrying two women who'd fought for the same man, and both emerged victorious, one with love claimed, one with dignity intact. The Caribbean whispered their story for generations. Two pirate sisters who proved that the greatest battles aren't fought with cannons, but with the impossible courage it takes to choose between love and loyalty, desire and duty, the heart's demands, and the soul's integrity. Some storms pass, some leave scars, but the bravest sailors keep their hands on the wheel and their eyes on the horizon, knowing that survival itself is a kind of triumph, and tomorrow, the winds might change,